Welcome back to part 2 of our message here at Red Truck Ministry. Mm-hmm. We're coming to you from Life Spring Worship Center, and my guest and my co-worker is Sabrina Jones. She is a dedicated minister of the gospel. She is an accomplished author. She wrote the book Tip to You, which simply means tomorrow is not promised to you. And she gives in detail about the loss of her daughter and how God has strengthened her through it all and told her to warn other people just how quickly they can be gone from this world. And you can order her book off Amazon, or you call her here at the church, or come here at the church, and she'll be glad to sell you one of them. So we're not in this for money. We're just saying we've got to get the message out there. And so today we want to continue talking about witchcraft right now, because we're coming up on what is called the Halloween season. And if you notice in the stores, lots of Halloween things. And I was in a store this week, and I saw this horrible looking giant in the middle of a display. He must have been 9 to 10 feet tall. The most horrid looking thing that the store decorated this thing. And he looked like if you bump him, he would fall on top of you. He was huge, and it reminded me of the age in which we're living. In the days of Noah, giants were in the land. And they were cohabiting. The angels would come down from their realm, the angelic realm, and come down and cohabit with earthly women. You read Genesis chapter 6. And there were giants in the land. So while I'm trying to shop in the store, there's this huge giant standing beside me, and I just began to pray in the spirit right there in the aisle of the store, because I thought, this is an evil symbol. And that's what I want to talk about today, is the symbols that cause us to get over into the devil's playing field. There is an open door that's in some people's lives because they as Hosea 4:6 said, my people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. So there's things they don't realize that the door is open. So they were so used to witchcraft in the days that Jesus walked on the earth and showed the works of God to his disciples and to all the people that would listen to him. And they were so used to the works of witchcraft. The question they ask, I'm going to let Sabrina read that to you in John. And so when you see in John what they were used to, you'll understand their question.
And this is John, I believe,
it's John 6,
28 and 29. It says, Then said they unto him, What shall we do that we might work the works of God? Verse 29 says, Jesus answered and said unto them, This is the work of God, that ye believe on him whom he hath sent.
Notice they wanted to know how they could work the works of God. In their minds, being under the influence of witchcraft, they were thinking, oh, I can do these works, well, why can't I do the works of God? And we're not denying that witches don't have power. It's illegitimate power. It's stolen power, because the church says it's harmless. It's just a little fantasy. It's just a little game. Don't upset the apple cart. Just let them do what they want to do. And then you wonder why 6 months down the road your child is having to have some medication. Your child can't sleep at night. They can't focus in school. Maybe, just maybe, there was an open door. And the first thing the people ask is, what can we do to do the works of God? And he said, believing God is the work of God. If you believe in God today, that was God working in you. No man comes to the Father except the Holy Spirit draws him. And so when the Holy Spirit does the drawing, the work of God began to take place.
Yes.
No man, and I teach this in the School of Ministry, you don't go after a man's head until God goes after his heart. Because what happens, it's the work of God that causes us to believe. No man could believe unless God drew him first.
That's right.
God came to you first, because you couldn't get to him. But he came to you, and by your believing, then the works of God can be manifest. But Sabrina, have you ever seen people try to do the works of God under the guise of witchcraft? Have you ever noticed that?
Yes, I have, in various places, and it's so sad because it just shows how, they don't really have the true knowledge of God. I know that I was sharing with you earlier, I remember reading something, and there was this one particular ministry that actually hired basically a witch on their minister staff.
Wow.
And so all because they wanted to be able to have that ability at their church where they could, have her to come and tell the people, give the people a word. Well, we don't have to do that. We don't have to go to the enemy's camp to be able to receive those things. God give us the ability to do those ourselves.
That's right. Yes, he does.
Yeah, he give us that ability to do that ourselves. And what I like about it is he give us all the power to do it. But we have to seek and trust in God and be able to go after what he has told us that we're supposed to do. And it's just sad. The ministries, in other words, and I hate to be so blunt, but some of the ministries have become so weak when it comes to the things of God.
How sad.
It is. It's very sad.
Well, you need to know the difference. When you read Galatians, he gives us the works of the flesh in the 5th chapter of Galatians, but he also talks about the fruit of the Spirit. The difference between God working in us and the flesh working in us is the flesh requires works. Please memorize that. The flesh requires that you work.
Oh, yes.
But the Spirit just causes you to bear fruit. So there's fruit bearing with the Holy Spirit. There's works with the flesh.
Yes.
And you don't have to work. He said it's just simply believing.
Yes.
That is the work of the Lord, if you'll just believe him for what he's already done.
Yes.
And that's why I thank him daily that even though I don't see clearly what he's doing and when he's going to accomplish it, but I do know I trust him. And he will work the works of God for me, not a work of the flesh. And he said they were asking Jesus in John chapter 6, what can we do to do the works of God?
Oh my God.
Believe. And I was visiting my doctor's office for an assessment, and I told this at our church. I had an assessment done for medical reasons, and so when they were asking me these questions, I said, well, I've just been a little overwhelmed lately, as everyone else has, and I'm just praying and pressing on. And my doctor ministered to me and said I was trying to find a house. We had sold our house and we were scaling down to get a smaller house, and I had looked everywhere trying to find a house, the doctor said, and could not find one. She said, I was so overwhelmed. And she said, so I walked in after looking at several houses that day, and I had worked that day. She said, I walked in the house and said to my husband, I'm done. I'm tired of looking for a house. And she said, I'm going to take a nap. And she said to her husband, I'm going to take a nap. Jesus is up to you. And she said, I went upstairs to take a nap, and when I had awakened, I had the house that already had called, and it was the house we wanted within our price range. And she said, all I said was, Jesus is up to you. So doing the works of God, as it says there in John chapter 6, is simply saying, I believe you. It's up to you. That's the work of God. And once he works that in us, then we have power over all witchcraft. Now, you mentioned in our earlier segment that people were doing the smudging, as it's called?
Sage smudging,
Sage smudging, trying to ward off evil spirits. And one of the reasons they put jack-o'-lanterns in yards is the same thing. We're warding off evil spirits. We're trying to spook away the spooks. And it's a work of the flesh. And you say, well, it's just a game. What you don't understand is fantasy is a spirit that takes you to a dark place.
Oh my God.
And this is what I'm concerned about. As most of you know, we have a school, 1st through the 12th grade. So we have some kindergartners here, but what I want people to see is Satan is after your children.
Yes.
And thank God your daughter was ready to go meet the Lord.
Amen.
How old was she when she passed?
She was 19 at the time.
19. Would you like to tell us what happened?
Well, basically she was headed in, took a lunch break and was headed back to her apartment, and she fell asleep when she got to her house, overslept. And I used to all the time tell them, don't rush getting back to the job. If you're late, they'll wait on you. There's nothing more you can do. But I believe this particular night she was rushing to get back to work, and that's when she was involved in a car accident, a fatal car accident. That car overflipped and landed into a river when she was on her way back to her job.
But you had the blessed assurance that she was saved.
Yes,
and she knew the Lord.
Yes, I did.
And
yes.
I've seen the grace of God on you. But the very day that we got the word that her daughter had died and I got to her house, Sabrina was sitting there with her prayer shawl on. Mm-hmm. And stronger than you can imagine to just have gotten that bad news. Mm-hmm. And the Lord's strength stood up in you. I saw that.
Oh, yes.
And that led her later on to go ahead and write the book, Tip to You, for tomorrow is not promised to you. Mm-hmm. So with that said, I see how young people, Satan thinks he can take all of our children.
Oh, yes.
And it used to be, I would see just basically in the teenage life, because teenagers are volatile anyway. One day they love mama, next day they hate mama. One day they like, certain things, and the next day they flipped and they don't like that anymore. That's and right. Styles are rapidly changing. The culture is rapidly changing.
Yes.
And so I've been praying, and I pray in the Spirit, and night before last, actually it was, Monday night. Mm-hmm. Monday night I dreamed that I was at a dark place. Oh my God. At an auditorium. The walls were painted back. The curtains were black, and I saw across the top of the auditorium it said, America's Got Talent. So in my dream I'm thinking that I'm at an America's Got Talent competition. Mm-hmm. So I was sitting there and the host came out. Remember the word host. He was a man, I don't know why I knew this, he was in his 40s, he had on khaki pants and a slip-over shirt, and he wasn't dressed like they normally do, hosting a show, all dressed up with a suit on or whatever. Right. He was dressed very casual. Remember that word. The casualness, that we have become too casual with God. He was casual, and suddenly this big woman came out. She was tall, big-built woman. She had on a black robe. She never spoke. He never introduced her. He would go to try to introduce her, and he would get quiet. And she was there to compete. Uh-huh. And the host looked at her and said, ladies and gentlemen, and before he could say her name, she fell to the floor and changed into a crackling plastic ball. Okay. And she was on the floor of the stage, and the casual host looked as like he was shocked. Here's this ball that's made of plastic, and it crackling noise like an old plastic water bottle might crack when you squeeze it. Right. And he said, oh my, and he was getting so amazed, and the people, you could hear them gasping. And they went like that to see how talented this woman was. And suddenly she came back up and turned back into a figure, but the thing that she was a black robe, and she had on a theatrical white mask. You could not see who she really was.
Wow.
This is the deception of
Yes.
fantasy and witchcraft.
Yes.
And so when she had that white mask on, the host was going to ask her again or announce her name, and he was trying to see behind her mask, and it was the big whole face covered mask, theatrical mask, and he was trying to maneuver to see behind her mask, and then he went, his face had a mask just like hers.
Wow.
She put that mask on him and never said a word. And he was shocked, and he looked at the congregation, and everybody was going, thinking how marvelous this woman was to be able to do these tricks. Twice she changed herself into a ball, and twice she came back up. Black robe, white face, and walked off the stage. As she was leaving the stage, 8 children followed her. In my dream, I knew their ages, 6, 7, 8, and 9. They were 2 children at those age groups.
Oh my God.
And I watched them, and they were skipping behind her. And I remember in my dream thinking, somebody's got to keep them from following her off. That's what this broadcast is about today. For you to see that I don't care if they think it's okay to burn sage or smoke, vaping. It bothers me for people to think it's okay to indulge in everything.
Yes.
It's the children in that age group that are in danger of being lost in witchcraft.
Oh, yes.
They followed that woman off the stage. People were gasping like, what are we going to do? Our kids are following her. And I woke.